My project is called Our Family, and it does family portraits of immigrants dealing with the refugee ban here in the United States, specifically photographing Somali families that have family members still stuck in Somalia that are being impacted by the travel ban or were being impacted by the travel ban. A lot of people that were mid-process for their family reunification or family resettlement forms and application process were essentially being halted due to the refugee ban. And the same thing for family members still in Somalia, some in Kenya dealing with refugee camps not being able to resettle back in the United States or to the United States and reconnect with their families. And so I wanted to create a physical representation of how this policy was impacting real lives. I'm from Minneapolis, Minnesota. I'm from an immigrant family. I'm East African. These issues are issues that are close to home. And so I'm coming at it from a perspective of like, these are issues that are impacting me and people that I know very well and deeply. And so I'd like to tell that story from that perspective rather than an outsider looking in. When you come from a particular community, you might have more of a connection, more of an insight, maybe more instinct into how to tell really nuanced stories in a way that someone who is an other or is an outsider maybe not able to do the same. When taking photos, I try my best to create more of a personal connection with the people that I'm photographing, so that they're much more than just a subject in my photo, and more of a person that I've gotten a chance to create something with. And I think that that's super important. And I think the other thing is, it's not too often that Black women or people of color have been given the opportunities to document their own communities and have that be the first light shown, or have that be the first point of view that is being seen. The most powerful artwork in the world, or artwork that's impacted me, has been work that not only allows me to see myself in what was produced, but also gives me the ability and opportunity to interact with it. And so a lot of my projects that are community-based incorporate either the actual viewer in some way through prompts or questions where they can answer them and then add them to the piece, or secondary, creating work that's a direct reflection of the community and the environment that I'm working in, oftentimes using photography where a lot of members of the community are in the photos themselves, or again, creating interactive ways for members of the community to be able to like incorporate their personal narrative or their even objects sometimes into the process and in the piece itself. And so interactive artwork or work that is a true representation of community is kind of what I try and focus on, just because as long as my audience can see themselves in the work, I feel like the work is that much more powerful. Community engagement has a particular impact on the work because you kind of can't plan for how people are going to respond to an interactive approach for art making, or in this case, photography. And in turn, that completely changes whatever the outcome that you are producing is going to be. Community engagement can define whatever your outcome is, and oftentimes changes it, because of the input that you receive, which, I think is an interesting way to create art in itself. My banner, my project, pushes against stereotypes by showing people in the community as themselves. I think when sometimes people think about immigration and refugees that don't have any reference point, it's always thought of or presented to be like these other people that you don't have any connections with are going to like ruin whatever it is that you feel is the norm. And it's kind of like they're vilified in a weird way. So my project kind of just shows that like we're all pretty much the same. Everyone's looking for the same levels of safety and comfort and basic needs that, are universal. And so I'm depicting the mundane, people walking to prayer, or in the same way that people probably walk to church. Teenagers hanging out in a park, just talking, as teenagers do all over the country, all over the world. So bringing back that, like, this othering isn't really real. We're all fundamentally similar in our interests and needs. And media, sadly, has tried to pin people against each other that has kind of stripped that understanding. And so my project is a really simple way to bring that back together. Everyone has at least one or two connections to a family portrait. Everyone in the images that are part of the banner are all doing like regular activities. They just happen to dress differently or come from a different culture, and you can kind of see that. But it's just to bring back the regularity of all of our lives. I want people that engage with my work, or even specifically this project, to walk away with knowing that there are other perspectives and ways to tell stories. I think a lot of my work has to do with like points of view and perspective around topics like immigration, like identity formation, xenophobia in some ways, where we could all come to a very similar understanding if we took the time to gain more context, knowledge, and understanding. And I think I'd like to think that my work moving forward is going to be ways to allow people to start having these more difficult conversations, or even giving them an initial touch point to start seeing things differently or from a different perspective. I think art is a catalyst for change. And if my work can serve as just a small part in that process, I think I've done my job. I think it's really important for women and female artists to be given the opportunity to tell these stories, because for so long in history we haven't been able to. And that perspective hasn't necessarily been given the same level of exposure and light, or even ability to be shown or created. And so I think it's only right to have women telling these stories today, because they have such a different perspective. And it's also an opportunity to kind of shift the narrative in history and see how moving forward, how documentarian work is going to be viewed differently based off of the people that were producing the work. I think it's, I'm trying to think of how to say this sentence, but it's finally time for us to have the same level of opportunity as men have been given for so long.